But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
After World War II, a new conflict emerged, the Cold War. The Cold War featured the world's two great powers, the democratic capitalist United States against the communist Soviet Union. Beginning in the late 1950s, space would become another dramatic arena for this competition, as each side sought to prove the superiority of its technology, its military firepower, and by extension, its political economic system. The space race was a way for the United States and the Soviet Union to boast technological innovation and the superiority of political ideologies on the global level. The race started in 1957 when the USSR launched the satellite Sputnik 1, the first satellite in space. Sputnik frightened Americans because they didn't understand its true power and capabilities. After Sputnik 1, the USSR launched Sputnik 2, which sent a dog named Laika into space. Laika was the first living organism to orbit the Earth. America responded with their own satellite, the Explorer 1, which was successful in becoming the first American satellite to orbit the Earth. The Explorer 1 carried scientific equipment that led to the discovery of the Van Allen radiation belt. The U.S. also attempted to launch the Explorer 2, but it failed to reach orbit.
In 1958, President Eisenhower created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. The intention of NASA was to continue to make advances in the field of space exploration. From 1961 to 1964, government funding of NASA increased by 500%. The American public backed the government's involvement in the space race by urging the nation's youth to advance in the science and mathematics subjects. In 1961, the Soviet Union took the biggest step in the race thus far. They successfully sent cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin into space. The United States seemed to be losing the race, but they were able to send astronaut Alan Shepard into space, making him the first American to do so. Near the end of 1961, NASA announced Project Gemini. The purpose of Project Gemini was to end the race by sending a man to the moon. Americans were disappointed in their new position in the race, and newly elected President John F. Kennedy knew he had to make a move to maintain American support in the race. As seen in his speech at Rice University, Kennedy promised the United States that NASA would send a man to the moon and back safely.
This is the Atlas Agena target vehicle for the Gemini 11 mission on Monday, September 12th. At the beginning of this mission, it will enable us to evaluate some important aspects of one type of lunar rendezvous. It launches at 5 minutes past 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
On June 16, 1963, Soviet cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova becomes the first woman in space. That same year, President Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald, leaving the presidency to Vice President Lyndon Johnson. Although the nation was in grief, the space race continued to escalate. On July 31, 1964, the spacecraft Ranger 7 transmits the first close-range images of the moon, marking another important victory for the U.S. as they inch closer to becoming level with the Soviets. 1 year later, Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov spent 12 minutes outside of his spacecraft performing the first ever spacewalk.
In 1969, the crew of the Apollo 11 were ready to attempt the impossible mission of landing on the moon. What JFK had promised 7 years ago before was becoming a reality. In preparation of the nation's first lunar landing mission, Apollo 11 crew members Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins underwent training to practice activities that they would be performing during the mission. On July 16, 1969, the crew launched into space from Merritt Island, Florida. They traveled for 4 days before they finally reached lunar surface. Armstrong and Aldrin exited the spacecraft, while Collins stayed in the Apollo to orbit the moon.
30 feet, 2.5 down, straight shadow, 4 forward, drift into the right level, 6, down a half, 30 seconds forward, just, okay. Contact right, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The crew returned to Earth safely, and they were hailed as heroes. The moon landing was the final chapter in the space race. The victory for NASA was a victory for democracy. The moon landing helped show the world how strong the U.S. and its democratic values were. The space race helped innovate technology to the level it is today.